Okay, people, good morning. Um, Seems like some people might be sleeping in so far this morning, but it's nice to see some of you here. Lisa, good morning. KC's here, good morning to you. And Ivan's here. Good morning, Mashid. Good morning, Manish. How are you doing? Um, who else do we have here? I think there's just four of us right now. We'll just give everyone else a minute to get over and get ready. Anybody have big weekend plans? Anything fun to do? You can't have much homework yet, can you? Or do you have a lot of homework? Okay. Let's see what I'm getting here. Um, yeah, Manish has an assignment due today. Oof. Gee, that didn't take long, hey? Right out of the gate. Day 4. Just give me 1 minute here. I'm just gonna respond to a message and then we'll get rolling, okay? Okay. That should be good. Okay, Lily's here. Good morning, Lily. All right, so we've got 8. Okay, I'm gonna get rolling. That's not all of us. I think we have 18 people registered in this class now, so it's getting pretty big. Um, but that's good. That's good news. Um, okay, so how today will work? We will talk a little more about this critical thinking skill, or yeah, skill. Talk a little bit more about it. I'll get you to come up with some arguments of your own. And then maybe what we'll do is we'll switch to Microsoft Teams and we'll try to do a big kind of video chat with all of us and just kind of see how that goes and see how chaotic it is. So if possible, let's try to all get on camera in the second part of today's class. I kind of wanted to do it earlier, but I wanted to lay some groundwork for us, some things for us to talk about. And now I think everyone is registered in this class who is going to be, so we can kind of start. Duan, good morning. Okay, so here we'll dive into the critical thinking stuff. We'll talk about it a little more. We'll probably take a break and then we'll come back on a Microsoft Teams chat and we'll see how that goes. Okay. So here we go. Without further ado. So yesterday we were talking about critical thinking and critical theory, and if you remember, I said that critical theory is kind of a big complicated thing, which we don't need to worry about too much, but I did want to point out a couple of aspects of critical theory. One, that when we acquire new information, it might challenge our common sense. Good morning, Erica. It might challenge our common sense. And the second one is that we wanted to understand that knowledge has meaning attached to it. And so even though something might be objectively true, sometimes the fact that we know that thing, that we know that piece of knowledge, or the way in which that knowledge is taught to us, um, that is connected to social and political meanings in society. So it's connected to kind of who has power and who doesn't. Okay, so to kind of to try to illustrate that, we talked about Christopher Columbus, and um, we said that the story of Christopher Columbus is factual, right? He is a historical figure. He did set sail in 1492, and he was the first European um, in this age of exploration to make it to the Americas, and his sort of discovery of the Americas set in motion all kinds of historical events that followed afterwards. And so he's a very important historical figure, but the story that's often told about him is one that frames Columbus as a sort of brave, heroic explorer. And it frames the New World, it frames North and South America as this new, undiscovered, pristine land that was sort of um, a great place for Europeans to start new countries. But we said that that's kind of true from one perspective, but not necessarily from all. Europeans might like to frame Columbus as a brave explorer, as a founding father, but for indigenous people who had been living in North and South America for thousands of years, the arrival of Columbus kind of spells the end of their way of life in their traditional way of life in North and South America. And so Columbus really begins a period of genocide and of exploitation and kind of destruction for indigenous people. And so Banamir's here, good morning, and Caleb's here, good morning to you too. So what I was trying to kind of drive home here is that the way in which we know this story, the way in which the story is told to us, is connected to social and political meanings. And so because North and South America, particularly North America, because power is mostly held by white Europeans, they prefer to tell the story of Christopher Columbus as one of a brave explorer discovering this new land. But again, that story is not necessarily true from other perspectives. Good morning, Karen, and good morning, Jimmy. So information has social and political meanings. We also address the sort of myth that the Columbus story is often, or what's included in the Columbus story is often the idea that he proved that the world was round. And first of all, it was proven that the world was round before Columbus set sail, right? Otherwise, it would have been a suicidal mission for him. But secondly, many other cultures already thought of the world as round prior to Columbus and prior to some of the European scientists who were sort of figuring it out at the time or slightly before. But often we don't mention those other cultures because there is a desire to frame knowledge and science as something that comes from Europe, right? That comes from Western culture. And again, that's not really true, or it's not entirely true. There's lots of other cultures prior to sort of Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers that were going about things in a scientific manner and were generating scientific knowledge. And these are non-Western cultures. And so, again, the fact that we connect the story of Columbus, the fact that we connect the idea of the world being round to a European way of seeing these stories, says a lot about who kind of holds power in North America and South America, and even global power as well. So what I'm trying to drive home here is that when we think critically, when we think about whether we should believe certain things or whether we should think of certain things as true, we should also consider who benefits from believing this certain thing. Okay, if this thing is true and if we believe it, who benefits from that belief and who will be harmed by it, whose experiences are limited by it. And so in the case of the Columbus story, if we believe the version of Columbus that he is a brave explorer, that story marginalizes Indigenous people. It sort of removes them and their experience from the story and just leaves Columbus, right? Their experience and all of the sort of negative things that happened to them after Columbus arrived, that's all removed from the story, and everybody, it's easy to forget about it. Again, we'll come back to that in terms of how certain stories are true or not true, or how they're true from certain perspectives. But again, the Columbus story here is connected to that concept of positionality that we talked about yesterday or the day before. The idea that who you are, the social groups that you belong to, does influence the way that you see society. And so it might be an interesting way to, or it might be an interesting thing to think about. If there was a person like Columbus who his arrival in the New World spelled the end of your way of life, the sort of destruction of your culture, would you want to give him a holiday on October 12th? And if you talk to most Indigenous or First Nations people in North and South America, their feelings are that no, he doesn't deserve that holiday. He's a bad guy. But again, it's the fact that he does have a holiday does tell you who has power in society, right? Okay, so then we moved on to this skill of critical thinking, okay? And again, I was trying to drive home the idea that this is a critical skill for us to learn, and it's a skill that can help us in all fields, whatever courses or profession we choose to go into eventually, and even just in our regular life. This is an important skill for us to learn, and we'll kind of continue to come back to it and develop it as this course goes on. And I tried to make the case to you that our lives are dictated by our beliefs, right? If we believe some things are good or bad, or right or wrong, or desirable or not desirable, that's going to influence the choices that we make. And if we have faulty beliefs, if we have beliefs that are not quite true, they might kind of lead us astray. They might kind of lead us to make wrong decisions. And so, again, critical thinking takes our beliefs, whether we already hold them or whether somebody is trying to give us a new belief, and it asks us to think if we should believe them. Is this thing worth believing? Okay. So I said, first of all, that we can only think critically about statements that people make. So things that people claim to be true or not to be true. So all arguments are based on statements, saying that something is or is not true, or is not the case, right? And then I said that what we'll do with those statements is we'll build arguments. And again, arguments, we shouldn't think of them as fighting, which we often do, or sort of, arguing back and forth. We should think of them as ways to sort of present knowledge and support them so that other people may believe them as well. Okay? So we introduced some new terminology, maybe some new terminology for you, I don't know. Premises and conclusions. And so I said conclusions were the thing that somebody is asking you to believe, and then premises are ideas that support that. So give you reasons to believe the conclusion. Okay. So I came up with this very simple argument yesterday. Again, it's an argument based on coffee because I do like drinking my coffee in the morning. And I made this argument and I said that you all should drink coffee. Of course, this is an imaginary argument. You don't have to drink it. You all should drink coffee. And so, like I said yesterday, as good critical thinkers, you should ask yourself, or you should ask me, why should I believe that? Right? Why should I do what you say? And so I gave you three premises. I gave you three reasons why you should drink coffee. And the first thing I said was that it was delicious. It tasted good. Second thing I said was that it was inexpensive. And the third thing I said was that it would stimulate your brain and help you study so you could get better grades. Okay, so that's a really basic argument. I gave you a conclusion, you should drink coffee, and I gave you three premises that hopefully supported that thing. And so what we did with that, or what we started to do with it yesterday, was, there's my argument there. What I suggested that we do is first take some steps to evaluate this argument. Sorry if you can hear that. They're just putting away the garbage bins behind my apartment here, and it's kind of noisy. We should evaluate this argument logically to see if it's even worth digging into, right? If it's worth evaluating further. And so the first thing I said is that we should look and see if the premises logically support the conclusion. And so the question I posed to you yesterday was, are these three premises, all reasons why someone might drink coffee? And so again, at this point, we don't want to worry about if they're true or not. We don't want to worry about whether we like anything about this argument. We're just trying to figure out if it sort of can stand up on its own feet, sort of thing. And so, yeah, I asked you, are these premises reasons why someone might drink coffee? And I think most of us agreed that that was the case, that yes, someone might drink coffee because they like the taste. That's a reason why someone might drink coffee. Someone might drink coffee because it is inexpensive. Certainly if coffee was very, very expensive, very few people would drink it, right? So the fact that it's inexpensive means that someone might drink it for that reason. And then the third one, it will stimulate your brain and help you to study and get better grades. Yeah, I think that's a reason why someone might drink coffee. They might want to, sharpen their brain or keep themselves awake when they're pulling an all-nighter studying for their final exam. All of those are kind of logical support for this conclusion. Now let me ask you this. I'm going to add a premise here, okay? And the premise I'm going to add is that the coffee beans are grown in Colombia, okay? So I'm going to say my argument now will be that you all should drink coffee. Good morning, Baha. You all should drink coffee. You'll ask yourself, okay, why should I believe that? And I'm saying because it is delicious, because it's inexpensive, because it helps stimulate your brain and help you study, and because the beans are grown in Colombia. Now, my question to you, that new premise I've added about the beans being grown in Colombia, is that a good premise? Does that logically support my conclusion? What do you think? Yes or no? The beans are grown in Colombia. Does that logically support my conclusion or not? Let's see. Karen says no because you think it's false. Karen, you're half right and you're half wrong. uh, Baha says yes. Casey says no. Erica says no. What else do we have here? Haneen says yes. Okay. Rashid says no. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. What else? Other answers? Other ideas? Okay, so this is a little bit of a tricky one, and here's how it works, right? At this point, so in our first step, we're just trying to figure out if there's logic to the argument, okay? And so what I'm trying to not convince you of, what I'm trying to explain here is that for a premise to logically support the conclusion, it has to be a reason why the conclusion should be accepted or should be true. And so if I'm trying to convince you to drink coffee, you might drink the coffee because you like the taste, and you might drink it because it's inexpensive, and you might drink it because you want to stay awake and, sort of zap your brain and help you study. But would you drink coffee because the beans are grown in Colombia? Well, probably not, right? Where the beans are grown is not really a reason to drink the coffee. Now, you might prefer beans that are from Colombia rather than Indonesia or somewhere else. That's possible. But just because the beans are grown in a certain place doesn't mean it would make you want to drink coffee. And so, and I think this is where some people might have gotten confused here, because the premise is true, right? It's, yeah, some coffee beans do come from Colombia. That is true. But it's not really a reason why you should drink coffee, right? And so that premise that I made up, this idea of the beans grown in Colombia, it's not really good logical support for my conclusion. It is true. It is related to what we're talking about, right? It's not completely, out in sort of left field. It's related to what we're talking about, but it's not really good support for our argument. And so that's kind of a premise that, if I was really trying to convince you of this, I probably wouldn't include. I probably wouldn't include it. So I'm going to get rid of that premise. I'm going to go back to my original argument here, okay? Now, the next step is, are the premises actually true, okay? Because maybe this goes without saying, but considering the state of what floats around the media today, maybe we should say it. If you want to have a successful argument, your premises have to be true, right? They have to be based on fact. You can't support your argument with a lie, or at least you shouldn't support your argument with a lie. So the question now is, do we have premises that are true, or is there a way that I could demonstrate to you that they're true? So let's go back here and let's go back to my first premise. My premise here is coffee is delicious. My question to you is that true? Is that statement true? Or if you think it's not true, is there a way that we could maybe prove it? Okay, so let me know in the comments here, what do you think? Is this either a true statement, or could we figure out some way to try to prove that it's true? Or even mostly true? What do you think? What do you think? Okay, so Baha says it is true. Okay. What else? What else do we have here? True, true. Okay. Is everybody, are all of you coffee drinkers here? And let's see. Okay, true, true, true. Now, for some of us, it certainly is true, right? I've got my cup of coffee right here, so obviously I think it's tasty. Otherwise, I wouldn't drink it. But some people might say, "Well, no, I don't like coffee. I think it tastes gross." So your premise is false. So if I bumped into someone, well, let's see here. If someone says that it's delicious, that person must have tried it before. That is true. That's true. Um, if I encountered somebody who said, "Well, I don't like coffee. I think it's really gross," what could I do to try to demonstrate to that person that my premise is mostly true? If I say yes, you should drink coffee, and I'm a coffee lover, does this count as self-serving bias? Um, let's see. We're going to talk, Manish, we're going to talk about bias a little bit later because it's an important part of critical thinking. Um, what I will say now is this argument that I've created here, what if I added a premise that said, you know, I like coffee, so you should drink it? Is that a good, does that logically support my conclusion? Is the fact that I like it a good enough reason for you to drink it? And you would have to decide that on your own. I would say probably not. I don't think that, it's not like I'm a celebrity influencer yet, although I do have my own YouTube channel, so I'm halfway there. Um, Mashid says, yeah, some people think that it's not delicious. That is true. You could show them different types of coffee. Yeah, so Karen, that's right. I could taste test it, right? If we were all in class and I was trying to convince you that you should drink coffee and I was trying to convince you that it was delicious, maybe I could bring in my coffee maker over there and I could make coffee for you all, and you could all try it, and maybe I could convince you that it's tasty. Um, yeah, I could offer them some coffee of my own, right? Um, Maybe what I could also do is I could do a survey, right? I could email all of Columbia College students and say, "Hey, we're doing a survey. Do you like to drink coffee or not?" And maybe we get some results back from that survey that says maybe 80% of Columbia College students like coffee. And so that first premise about coffee is delicious, if you already like it, then you're going to believe that premise. But even if you don't, even if you feel that, ugh, coffee is kind of gross, I could generate some data and say, look, most people like the taste of coffee. So even if that premise isn't totally 100% true, I might be able to convince you that it's mostly true, right? That it is, yeah, that it's mostly true for a lot of people. Okay. Okay. What about my second premise? My second premise was that it is inexpensive, that coffee's not expensive. Is that true? What do you think? Is that a true premise? Coffee is inexpensive, is what I'm saying. Baha says, I don't think it's biased because you are offering, not obligating it to that person. Okay. I'm going to press pause on that, Baha, and we'll get back to that. Mashid says yes. Casey says true. Erica says true. Lily says no. Okay. Not in the long run if you are buying it every day. Okay. That's good. What else do you think? Is it true? Is it true that coffee is not expensive? No, no, not true. Oof, my argument is falling apart. We'll see. We'll see if it falls apart. Um, so we're kind of going back and forth here with this one, and that's okay because inexpensive is relative, right? What's expensive for one person, not sure, but would say no. Yeah, what's expensive for one person is inexpensive for another one, right? If I was a multimillionaire, coffee is not that expensive, right? Come on. But if I'm, working a very low paying job, or if I don't have a job, or if I'm homeless and living on the street, a $2 cup of coffee might be really expensive for me, right? So, what if it's expensive or not? It's relative to actually how much money you have, right? Um, so how could I demonstrate this to you? How could I prove that coffee is for most people not that expensive? What could I do? What could I do to show you that, you know, coffee is affordable for most people? How could I go about that? How could I go about proving to you that coffee is not that expensive? Haneen says depends. Arabian coffee is more expensive depending on the type. Right? So the type of coffee that you like might change the price as well, right? Some coffees and coffee beans are more expensive than others. And if you like really fancy caramel macchiato things from Starbucks, it might actually be really expensive. Um, what if, let me see here, show them Starbucks and Tim Hortons lines during peak hours. Okay. Actually, Karen, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a good one. Um, Clearly, many people can afford to drink coffee, right? Because if you look at the line, if you look at the business that Starbucks and Tim Hortons and other coffee shops do, you'll see that a lot of people are in there buying coffee, and so they must be able to afford it, and therefore must not be that expensive, right? It must be somewhat affordable. That's a good one, Karen. I hadn't thought of that, but that would definitely work. Um, I guess maybe what I could do is I could go online and I could research what certain things cost, right? So I could compare coffee to bottled water, um, or to an energy drink, or to Coke or Pepsi or stuff like that. And maybe I could say that actually coffee is in some cases cheaper than some of those, right? Buying coffee that you can make at home is much cheaper. Yeah, and that's true as well, Casey. Um, I could compare all those things like Coke or Pepsi and coffee and bottled water and Monster Energy drink and things like that. But then I could also do a calculation for how much it costs to make at home. And so maybe with all those numbers, maybe I could make a fancy bar graph or something. Um, and maybe I could show you that coffee is actually not that expensive. Now, ultimately, it would still be up to you and your sort of personal circumstances, right? So if you're a super rich person, coffee is just not that expensive, right? If you're a homeless person living on the street, it's always going to be. But whether it's inexpensive or not is always going to be a bit of it's going to be connected to your personal circumstances and your judgment, right? You might think that spending $2 on coffee every day is kind of a waste of money, or you might not. Um, but all of those things are things that I could do to try to convince you that it is inexpensive. Okay, whether I would succeed or not is another story, but I could try that, right? Now, my last premise was this one. It was that it will stimulate your brain and help you study and result in better grades. Whew. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but how could I prove it to you? How could I convince you that that premise is true, that actually drinking coffee will help you get better grades? How can I prove that to you? What could I do? What could I do about that one? How could I prove to you that if you drink coffee, it will help you to get better grades? Can you say it again? Yeah. How can I demonstrate that drinking coffee leads to better grades, better academic performance? How could I prove that statement, or try to prove that statement? Okay, Ginny doesn't understand. Okay. So in order for my premise, in order for this idea of drinking coffee to get better grades, in order for that to support my conclusion, to support my statement that you should drink coffee, I need to try to prove it to you. I need to make sure that that statement about drinking coffee equaling better grades, I need to make sure that that's true somehow. How could I prove it? How could I make sure that is true? Is this a trickier one, maybe? Well, I guess if we were in class, what a weird experiment might be to give coffee to half the class before an exam and see how they do, right? Anita says, coffee contains caffeine that provides the brain with energy, and so to support this statement, the best way is to convince the person is to provide data, maybe by testing it on university students. Yeah, so I could actually set up a test, right? I could give people coffee before their exam or before they study for their exam, and then some people give them no coffee and see how they do, right? Erica says I could look it up in Google and talk about that coffee contains caffeine. Yeah, by sharing personal experience. Yeah. Tisa can help you stay awake. Facts and examples. Yeah. All of those are good, people. Yeah, I could either try to run an experiment of my own, or I could do some internet searching and I could see if scientists have actually done work on this before, which I'm sure they have, right? We know that there's caffeine in coffee. We know how caffeine works on your brain, and so maybe we can pretty easily prove that this statement is true. Maybe we can very easily find research where scientists have actually tested students to see if they perform better on exams when they drink coffee. And so I could prove that premise to you. I could prove that last premise to you by saying, look at these studies. I've found 3 or 4 studies that say when students drink coffee before they study or before an exam, they actually do better. They perform better on that exam. Maybe. I actually haven't done that, to be honest, but I'm sure someone has researched it. Okay, so the question then is, do I have a logical, valid argument here? Now, the question is not, don't trust it. Well, we'll talk about that as well a little bit later, Bahaz. What parts of the internet we should trust and what parts we should not, because all parts of the internet are not created the same, right? But that's a good point. Um, but my question to you now is this a logical, valid argument? And so I'm not asking you if it's 100% true. I'm not asking you if you believe it. I'm not asking you if you now want to drink coffee. All I'm asking you is that do we have a logical argument here? So, do I have all statements here? Do I have premises that logically support my conclusion? And do I have premises that are either A, true, or B, yeah, we could probably prove that they are, we could probably prove that they're true, or at least they're not obviously, obviously false. So what do you think? Do I have a decent argument here? Do I have a valid argument? Again, you don't have to agree with it. You don't have to believe it. But have I built a logical argument? What do you think? Okay, Baha says, yeah, this is a logical argument. Erica's okay with it. All right. Neen says, yes, okay. Karen's okay with it. That's good. Okay. Casey says yes. Okay. Sam's good with it. Okay. Um, and I think I agree with you too. Jimmy's not sure. Okay, that's all right. Um, this is maybe I'm biased because I created this thing. Mashit says yes. Manish says a logical argument. Ivan, yes. Uh, yeah, I think this is a logical argument, right? It's not a perfect one. Um, Lily's okay. Um, it's not a perfect argument, right? Because one of my premises is kind of based on personal preference, right? Some people, no matter what kind of coffee um, no matter what kind of coffee you give them, they just won't like the taste. So my first premise is mostly true, but it kind of depends on your preferences. Um, my second premise would be probably mostly true for most people, right? There will be some people for whom coffee is too expensive. Some people will feel that um, it's not a good use of their money, right? Because if you coffee might only cost a couple of dollars a day, but of course, if you add up those couple of dollars over a month or over a year, it actually turns out to be a lot of money. And so some people may feel that that's too much money for them to spend on that thing. So my second premise is it's pretty good, but there's always some people who um, coffee will be expensive or they just won't want to spend the money. The third one, it kind of depends on the research that I find, right? If I find some really good academic research that clearly demonstrates that drinking coffee will help you to get better grades, then yeah, I would have a pretty good premise. I think my premises do logically support my conclusion. I think that they're all reasons why someone might drink coffee. And so I think this one's not bad. Um, it's not as solid as it could be. But of course, when I originally made it up, I just made it up off the top of my head. And so it's not a perfect argument, but that's okay. Um, it doesn't have to be for our sort of purposes here. Um, well, and that's true, Jimmy. And I don't know if I won't get into it right now because I think I'll save it for a little bit later. But there are, as maybe a bit of a spoiler alert, we can say now, um, there are other things to consider, right? I haven't talked at all about health, right? There are studies out there. Some tell you that coffee and caffeine are really good for your health. Some of them say that they're awful and you should not have it. Some studies are kind of in between. Um, but regardless, I haven't really addressed people's health. Sometimes caffeine can interfere with the quality of your sleep, right? And so if you're not sleeping well, um, that might interfere with your health or might interfere with your performance on exams as well. So there are aspects of the coffee question that I really haven't dealt with, right? Because I've created the argument, I've told you what I wanted you to hear, right? I've given you premises that support the conclusion that I want you to believe, but I've kind of ignored stuff um, that might get in the way of my argument, right? I haven't talked about health. Um, I haven't talked about religious religious ideas. Caffeine, depending on who you talk to, caffeine is a drug, and some religions forbid their people from consuming drugs or alcohol. And so, if you belong to a religion that forbids caffeine, then my argument doesn't matter to you, right? Because your faith dictates that you don't consume caffeine, and so my argument is totally invalid to you, right? I won't be able to convince you with taste and inexpensive and test scores because your religion is going to be probably a stronger determinant of how you feel. So I didn't address that either. Um, but I think I'll push pause on that for a moment. And I know some of us might want to go there. But that kind of leads into addressing counter arguments. And so that's kind of the next step up for us. And so I think, again, I'll press pause on that idea and we'll come back to it a little bit later. Okay. Um, but it's certainly valid to think about, um, if you're evaluating an argument, it is important to think about what's not in the argument and what are the arguments against what that person's trying to convince you of. And so in terms of drinking coffee, we could definitely make an argument that says that you shouldn't drink it at all. But we'll deal with that a little bit later. Okay, let's see. Here's what I'd like to do, okay? Here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take a little break of maybe about 10 minutes or so, and then I'd like to try to jump on Microsoft Teams in a video chat and talk, because we haven't talked face-to-face yet. And to be 100% honest with you, that's the thing I kind of miss the most. I will admit I really like being in the classroom and I really like talking to students. And so this is really, this situation is kind of artificial and weird. But I would like to do a video chat with all of you and just, see if we can sort of connect that way. But what I want to talk about in the video chat is I want to talk about, I want you to come up with your own simple argument, just like I did. Do we have to open the camera? I'd like you to, if you are able to, if you're still in bed and not dressed, then don't don't do that. But it would be nice if we could see your face, if at all possible. Right. So what I'd like you to do is create your own argument, okay? And a very, very simple one. And it can be about anything, right? So I created one based on coffee. You could create an argument based on sports or TV shows or video games or music or politics or food or anything that you want. All it has to do is have a conclusion, something that you might want us to believe, and then have some supporting premises, so reasons why we should believe it. Okay. Yeah, very, very simple. Can be on anything, it doesn't matter. Yeah, and so maybe what I'll do then is I will give you Um, I'll give you a 10-minute break and then another 5 minutes. So maybe at 9:10, 10 minutes after 9, I'll open a meeting in Microsoft Teams, and then I think you can just kind of join into it, I believe, but I guess we'll figure that part out because I haven't really done it yet. Um, Again, if the Wi-Fi doesn't work or whatever, that's all right. I just want to try this and see if we can um, see if we can get it to work properly. Okay, so if if your Wi-Fi is not working properly or whatever, don't panic. I just want to see how this goes and maybe we can talk a little bit. So we'll take a break. While you're on your break, try to come up with a very simple argument, something you might want us to believe, and then a couple of reasons why we might want to believe that thing. And again, the argument can be about anything. Again, I just picked a silly one about coffee. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be deeply thought provoking. It just has to have logical support for the conclusion, and premises have to be true or at least not totally false. Um, okay, so can we do that? Well, we're gonna try to do that. So what I'll do here is I'll sign off now. We'll take a break, and actually maybe around 9:15. Around 9:15, I'll start the Microsoft Teams chat, and hopefully you can just jump into it, and then we'll just talk and see how it goes. Okay. Um, all right. So let's do that. Thanks for participating in the chat here this morning. That was really really good. Um, yeah, and hope to see you in about 15 minutes. Okay, so have a break, come up with a cute little argument, and then we'll talk about them. Okay, so see you in a minute.